There are men in this world who walk quietly, who ask for nothing, who carry their past like folded flags inside their hearts. You see them every day, a lunchbox in hand, worn boots, a tired smile, and you would never know the battles they fought or the promises they made in silence. But sometimes, fate calls again, and the man everyone overlooks becomes the only one who can stand between life and loss. This is the story of a quiet single father, a man who wanted nothing more than to raise his little girl in peace until the moment a colonel said, "Any man will do." And the room froze when he stepped forward. Before we begin, if stories of quiet heroes, family honor, and second chances touch your heart, I gently invite you to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing moving, inspiring tales for those who still believe in goodness. Now, let us begin. Morning at Fort Heron never rushed. It settled gently like dew on the wings of the aircraft lined across the tarmac. The base woke up with low hums, diesel carts, rolling mechanics calling to each other, radio chatter drifting from open hangar doors. Pilots passed by in crisp uniforms, each footstep confident, each salute sharp. And then there was him. Michael Carter moved differently, quiet, unhurried, almost invisible. He wore a faded maintenance jumpsuit, sleeves rolled to his forearms, hands carrying a metal toolbox. He didn't bark, orders, didn't stride like a man trying to prove anything. He simply worked, cleaning canopies, checking hydraulic lines nobody assigned him, wiping dust from the fuselage as if it were sacred. To most, he was just the base janitor who happened to know a little about planes. To those who paid attention, if any really did, he worked with a careful reverence, as though each aircraft had a heartbeat, as though steel deserved gratitude. The morning sun poured into Hangar Bay 4 as Michael polished a weather-aged A-10 Thunderbolt II. The old Warthog wasn't supposed to be here anymore, retired to a back corner, files marked awaiting disposal approval. Yet its armor still bore scars of long-forgotten missions. Someone had once painted the faint outline of a raven beneath the cockpit glass. Over time, heat and years had worn it away until only a shadow remained, as if the memory itself was trying not to be seen. Michael ran his fingers over the cockpit frame, subtle, slow, almost a caress. Not nostalgia, not pride, a promise. Footsteps echoed. Little sneakers. A tiny backpack swung like a pendulum. Daddy Lily barreled toward him, pigtails bouncing pink hair, clip shining like a soft sunrise. 8 years old, but sunlight itself couldn't look more alive. Michael's world, which seemed cold steel and solemn duty only moments ago, warmed instantly. He knelt, scooping her up in his arms. "You're early," he murmured, voice low, steady. "I woke up happy," she said simply. "I dreamed we were flying." Michael's smile was faint but real, the kind of smile that came not from joy, but from gratitude, for even a small moment of peace. "Flying, huh? Where to? Somewhere with clouds that looked like marshmallows." And Mommy was there. She wasn't talking, but she was smiling. "You were holding her hand." Michael paused. A breath caught in his chest. His jaw tightened, not from pain, but from trying not to show it. "She always liked the clouds," he said softly. Lily tapped his nose. "You like them too, even when you pretend you don't." He ruffled her hair gently. Pretending was something he'd become good at. A voice called from the hangar entrance. Sergeant Ron Peters, barrel-chested, good-hearted, never quiet. "Morning, Carter. You running a daycare or maintaining aircraft?" Lily stuck her tongue out. Ron gasped dramatically. "Mutiny on base." "A tiny rebel." Michael lifted Lily down, patting her backpack. "School bus will be here in 10 minutes. Stay where I can see you." She nodded and skipped toward the open hangar door, humming to herself. Ron leaned against a tool cabinet, sipping cheap base coffee. You hear the commotion commands on edge. Some special forces unit got pinned overseas. Nasty interference. No birds can get in the air without getting jammed to pieces. Michael didn't look up. I heard. You ever think? Ron hesitated. I don't know. Feels wrong sometimes. We sit safe while those guys get chewed out there. Michael continued tightening bolts, his expression unreadable. Everyone has a role, Ron. Ron snorted. Yeah, well, I'd take a role where I don't mop jet fuel at 9 a.m. Michael didn't reply. He didn't need to. Ron wandered off, muttering about cafeteria biscuits. Left alone, Michael exhaled slowly. Beneath his calm exterior, something churned, quiet, controlled, but undeniably there. His gaze drifted to the horizon, where sky met earth, a line only pilots ever truly chased. Duty wasn't gone. It simply slept. Mr. Carter, he turned. Emily Hayes stood beside the A-10 flight suit, crisp helmet under one arm. Young, bright-eyed, still carrying that restless hunger new pilots wore before combat, replaced idealism with clarity. Her gaze lingered on his hands, hands that knew machinery, the way poets knew words. Morning, Lieutenant Michael greeted. I noticed you've been working on this warthog again. She hesitated. They're not really flying anymore. Machines don't care about politics, he replied. They care if someone remembers them. Emily studied him, curiosity sharp. You ever fly? You move like someone who's comfortable around jets, not intimidated. For a moment, silence, the kind where truth hovered like a blade. I used to know the sky, Michael said simply. That's all. Emily wanted to ask more, wanted to peel back the layers. But before she could, a sudden alarm blared across the base. Klaxon. High priority alert. All command staff report. Voices crackled over the PA. Rapid footsteps thundered. Helicopter rotors spooled up outside. The air changed, charged electric. War had found its way into the calm morning. Michael froze, not in fear, but recognition. Something inside him stirred like steel, recalling fire. Colonel Grace Whitmore strode past the hangar window, crisp uniform, 3 silver eagles glinting on her shoulders. Command presence radiated off her, like heat authority honed by duty, compassion tempered by scars she never spoke of. She was speaking urgently to a cluster of officers, voice sharp but steady. No available pilots in range who can lift in time. We have 22 minutes before that unit breaks. Michael watched. Threads of old purpose began stitching themselves back into his chest. Lily tugged his sleeve, eyes wide. Daddy, is there danger? He knelt again, not rushed, not shaken, just there grounding her. There are brave people doing their job, he said. And sometimes the world shakes when good people stand up. She looked at him strangely, as if sensing more truth than her years should hold. Emily's headset lit up. She stepped away, face draining at whatever she heard. They don't have a pilot. Air support's down. Those soldiers, she swallowed. They're going to die. Michael's gaze drifted to the A-10 again. The old metal beast seemed to breathe, waiting. Remembering. A raven shadow beneath glass, thunder rolling beyond blue skies. He reached out, fingertips resting on the cold fuselage. Then he stood taller than before, still quiet but no longer invisible. He looked at Lily, brushed a wisp of hair behind her ear. Stay here. Don't move. She didn't understand, but she nodded. Children often recognize destiny even before adults do. Then Michael walked toward the hangar's briefing doors. Emily blinked. Sir, where are you? He didn't answer. Not yet. His boots echoed like a man returning to a battlefield only he could see. He paused at the threshold, just long enough to whisper words no one heard. I made a promise. Then he disappeared inside. And somewhere beyond the sound of alarms and distant rotors, the sky seemed to hold its breath. The command briefing room was never meant to feel sacred, yet in crises, it carried the weight of a chapel. Maps glowed on digital screens. Red zones pulsed like open wounds. Officers crowded around the table, tight shoulders, tense. Jaws clipped voices. Colonel Grace Whitmore stood at the center posture straight as a metronome. The silver eagle pins on her collar gleamed like truth under harsh fluorescent light. Her voice held firm, but even steel can bend under enough pressure. Satellite link confirms the Special Forces team is pinned inside a canyon. Enemy drones and artillery on both sides. They have wounded. And radio interference still blankets the region. If we wait another 20 minutes, she stopped. She didn't need to finish. Everyone understood the math of war. Captain Morse, operations chief, scrubbed a hand through his hair. We scrambled 2 pilots, systems jammed, couldn't break signal corruption. Air Force Command says they're rerouting assets, but too late. Grace finished for him. Her tone wasn't despair. It was fury restrained by discipline. The room hummed with helplessness. And then I'll go. A simple sentence. Quiet, flat, unornamented. Yet it cut through every other sound like a blade through silk. All heads turned. Michael Carter stood in the doorway, still in maintenance coveralls, grease on his knuckles, no rank insignia, no authority to speak. And yet his presence pulled the air toward him like gravity. Morse blinked confused irritation, sharpening his voice. Carter, this is a classified briefing. You're out of line. Michael didn't flinch. His eyes locked onto Grace's, not aggressive, not pleading, just steady. Certain. I can fly, he said. I can get to them. A hush swallowed the room. For a second, nobody breathed. Then came the laughter, the short, nervous kind born not from humor, but disbelief. That's the janitor, right? Someone whispered. Maintenance tech, another corrected. Not that it mattered. Colonel Bennett, stiff-backed and rigid as doctrine itself, scowled. Carter. This is not a heroic movie moment. Step outside before you embarrass yourself further. Michael didn't move. I'm not trying to be a hero. His voice remained calm, almost gentle. That more than anything unsettled them. Heroes shouted, demanded thumped chests. This man. He simply stood. Grace narrowed her eyes slightly, studying him, not as a nuisance, but as a puzzle. Mr. Carter, she said carefully, you're a civilian contractor. You don't hold flight status. We don't even know your background. You don't need to, Michael replied. Just give me clearance to take the A-10 in Bay 4. Morse snorted. That thing hasn't flown in years. It will. How the hell can you know that? Because I made sure it would. That answer silenced even the critics. A few eyes widened, not at arrogance, but at conviction so firm it almost felt like truth, made flesh. Bennett slammed a clipboard down. This is absurd. We will not let some mechanic play pilot because he has feelings about the situation. This is the United States Air Force, not a volunteer firehouse. Michael turned to face him. 12 men will die because protocol outweighs action. If I fail, you lose nothing but time you're already losing. If I succeed, you expect us to gamble national assets. On Grace lifted a hand. Bennett stopped mid-sentence, lips tight with irritation. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Mr. Carter, she said slowly, you understand that if you take off without authorization, you will be violating federal aviation and military law. You will face charges. Prison is likely. Michael nodded once. I do. Then why are you here instead of in a cockpit already? A flicker crossed his features. Not hesitation memory, regret braided with duty. Because once he said quietly, I acted alone. and someone I love didn't come home. I won't make decisions like that again, not without trying to do it right first. The words settled like dust in sunlight, soft, but impossible to ignore. For the first time, Grace's expression changed, not dramatically, just the faintest wince behind her eyes. Loss recognizes loss. Duty recognizes the scars it carves. Before she could speak, a radio crackled through the room. Enemy armor advancing 2 minutes to breach. Casualty numbers rising. Requesting immediate air support. Repeat immediate. Static swallowed the voice. Emily Hayes burst into the room, breathless, helmet in hand. "Ma'am, we don't have time for authorization chains. Whoever goes has to go now." Her gaze found Michael. Shock flashed across her face. Not rejection, but understanding. He really meant it. Grace inhaled, then exhaled slowly. Command was not simply issuing orders. It was bearing the consequences of them. Any man will do, she had said earlier. But the universe had a cruel way of testing conviction. Bennett shook his head furiously. "Colonel Whitmore, do not entertain this insanity. If you authorize him—" "I didn't ask for authorization," Michael said, tone still level. "I only asked for a chance to do the right thing." Grace looked at him for a long moment. The bass noise faded in her ears. The war map's blinking light softened. The entire room narrowed to one man standing without rank, without recognition, without a past he wished to explain. There was no bravado in him, only purpose. Then she spoke not loudly, but with the weight of command. "Get him on the flight checklist." Gasps, outrage, shock. Bennett actually stepped back as though struck. "You can't. I didn't grant clearance," Grace replied, voice like cold iron. "I only said to check him. If he can't pass, he walks out." She turned to Michael. "Carter." "One question." He met her gaze. "Why do you think you can do this when trained pilots couldn't?" A beat. A heartbeat. The quiet before destiny answers. Because Michael said, when you have nothing left to lose but a promise, you fly differently. Something in Grace shifted then. Not belief, but acknowledgement. The kind soldiers give each other when courage defies logic. Checklist room. Now. Michael nodded once and walked, not rushed, toward the hallway. Emily followed, stunned but moving. Others watched him go like a man walking into myth. Bennett fumed, pacing like an impatient storm. Grace remained still. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar in the middle of chaos. Hope. The checklist room smelled of oil paper and faded glory. Old mission logs lined the shelves, some yellowed with years, others crisp from recent deployments. Screens glowed with maintenance readouts and biometric interface panels meant for pilots, not janitors. Michael stood in the center still as mountain stone. Emily Hayes rushed in behind him, helmet tucked under her arm, breath sharp from adrenaline. 2 airmen set up diagnostics, unsure whether to salute question or simply stare at the man calmly rolling up his sleeves like he'd been here yesterday instead of whenever. She stepped closer. Do you really know what you're doing?" Michael looked at her eyes, steady and oddly gentle. "Yes." Emily blinked. A simple yes shouldn't have held that much gravity, yet it did. She swallowed. "They're good men out there," she whispered. "I know." A beat of silence stretched between them, not tense, but heavy with untold history. One of the techs cleared his throat. We need your pilot ID to begin." Michael extended his hand palm open. "Scan." The tech frowned but complied. The base scanner hummed as it passed over his wrist. Green lights flashed. Then access error. No active record found, and beneath that, archived clearance level, redacted, special unit status, classified, retired. The tech froze, blinked, looked again. Emily leaned in, is that before she could finish, the system flickered. A second code screen appeared locked behind layers of digital frost, not accessible, not meant to be touched. The tech swallowed. I don't understand, Michael simply said. Continue. He didn't ask permission. He didn't brag. He moved to the next panel as though he'd walked this room hundreds of times, muscles, remembering every button, every checklist stroke. Flight physiology test, another tech murmured. It'll detect stress fatigue, heart irregularities. Michael rested his fingertips on the biometric pad. No hesitation. The machine scanned pulse respiration, neural conductivity. Graphs spiked, then leveled into calm precision. Result clear. Condition optimal. Emily stared. Men decades younger struggled under less pressure than what he carried now. You haven't flown in. She started searching for the right word. Long enough, Michael replied. It wasn't deflection. It was mourning disguised as fact. Outside alarms sounded. Time was thinning. Emily voiced what no one else dared. If you failed once, why would you risk failing again? Michael paused. Real pause, not for search of words, but for courage to touch memory. I didn't fail the mission, he said quietly. I failed someone I loved by surviving it. Emily's throat tightened. Loss is a language soldiers learn fast. Before she could answer, the room door opened. Colonel Grace Whitmore entered, her gaze sharp, yet unreadable. She'd shed the strained urgency from earlier. What walked in now was a commander forged by stakes she refused to lose. Status, she asked. Vitals clean. One tech answered. Cognitive scores. Unusually stable. Flight muscle response. Elite tier. Grace's eyes flicked to Michael. Elite. The tech looked down at his readings. Ma'am, this profile is... I've only ever seen numbers like this on Tier 1 pilots, or whatever's above that. Grace's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She dismissed the techs with a nod. When they stepped out, she faced Michael directly. You used to fly, she said. Not question, but confirmation. Michael lifted his flight gloves, old worn, creased at the knuckles from years of gripping metal and fate. Once. Why did you stop? He looked past her toward the open hangar, where the aging A-10 waited like a warhorse that refused to die. Because the sky cost me more than the ground ever could. Grace didn't flinch. Commanders learn to look into scars, not away from them. And now there are men who won't see their kids if someone doesn't fly. Grace breathed in slow. This isn't redemption. No, he agreed softly. Redemption is selfish. This is duty. Emily's breath hitched. She'd trained her whole life to reach that kind of clarity, and here it stood before her, disguised in grease-stained sleeves and quiet grief. Grace stepped closer. I need to hear you say, you can do this. Not believe. Not hope. Say it. Michael met her eyes unblinking, steady as steel cooled under moonlight. I don't miss. The room felt colder and safer at the same time. Grace nodded once. Gear him. Emily moved before she could think, grabbing a flight harness off the rack. Sir, this model is heavy. It's fine. It's built for younger, I know. He slipped into it like slipping into memory, efficient, practiced, almost reverent. Each buckle clicked shut like a door, sealing the past behind him. Emily handed him a helmet. His fingers brushed its edge, recognition flaring across his expression, then smoothed into calm acceptance. Grace watched him, not just as a commander, but as a woman seeing something rare. A man not chasing glory, but carrying obligation like armor. You'll have no comms, she warned. No AWACS, no GPS lock. If the interference holds, you'll be alone. I've been alone before, he replied. That answer weighed like truth forged in the dark. Remember, she added quietly, you're not just flying into danger, You're flying back into who you were." Michael's gaze softened, distant. "I know." And then softer still, "I never really left." The base siren screamed again. No more time. Grace stepped aside. "Go." Michael didn't rush. Quiet men rarely do. He walked toward the A-10 like a man approaching a gravestone and a home all at once. Emily followed a few steps, unable to stop herself. "You really were someone," she whispered. Michael rested a hand on the cold metal nose of the warthog. The faded raven shadow beneath the canopy stared back. "I still am." And with that, he climbed the ladder, settling into the cockpit that fit him like memory. Ground crew scrambled. Engines spooled with a growl that rolled across the base like thunder recalling war. Grace watched from the hangar doors, a hand unconsciously drifting to her chest, right above where duty meets heart. He belonged in the sky. And the sky, for the first time in years, seemed to brace itself for his return. The A-10's engines ignited with a low, throaty rumble, like an old warhound waking from a deep sleep it never expected to be roused from again. The hangar trembled. Dust drifted from rafters. A mechanic dropped his wrench, stunned. Conversations on the flight line fell silent one by one as heads turned to the impossible sight. A forgotten warthog coming to life. Somewhere in the command tower, someone cursed. Somewhere else, a young airman whispered, "Who the hell is that?" But down on the tarmac, nobody needed to speak. They could feel it, the shift, the electricity, the sense that history had quietly reversed course, and something ancient in the fabric of courage had just answered a call. Michael sat inside the cockpit, hands resting on controls like they'd never left, his breathing steady, his gaze fixed straight ahead, not with hunger to prove, but certainty of purpose. The glass canopy reflected his eyes, and for a moment in that reflection, a shadow flickered behind him, a raven silhouette. Emily stood by the hangar helmet under one-arm headset pressed to her ear. She listened to the operations channel erupt in disbelief. "Who authorized that jet?" "We don't have clearance on that aircraft." "Get me Colonel Whitmore, now." Grace. Whitmore watched from the edge of the runway, arms crossed, spine straight as a flagpole. To the untrained eye, she looked like every officer commanding a crisis. But her fingers, barely visible, trembled once. Not from fear. From the weight of a decision only she fully understood. Beside her, Colonel Bennett stormed forward, vein rising in his temple. "This is a disgrace. Pull him off that runway." Grace didn't turn. "He hasn't taken off yet." "You gave him permission. I gave him a checklist," she cut in. "He passed it." Bennett sputtered like a boiler about to explode. "He is a civilian." Grace's voice stayed calm. "He's the only one who can get those soldiers home today." "That can't be your reasoning." Grace finally turned eyes like sharpened glass. "It isn't. My reasoning is this: sometimes command means knowing when the rule book harms the mission more than it protects it." Bennett stared at her. He had no words for that. Not because he disagreed, but because deep inside he feared she might be right. Inside the cockpit, Michael ran final checks. Flaps, trim, fuel pressure, control surfaces, hands steady, heart quiet, soul awake. He whispered not prayer, not plea, a promise, for her and for those waiting home. Wind crawled across the runway like a living thing. The tower barked warnings over the comm lines he wasn't connected to. Static flowed over the horizon, the same electronic poison-killing communication overseas. And then he pushed the throttle. Engines roared, bolts vibrated. The very bones of the A-10 seemed to shake off dust and time. Ground crew scrambled away as wheels rolled. The old bird moved slow at first, then faster, gathering life, gathering defiance. Emily exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since sunrise. Bennett slapped the air in fury. "If he lifts, he's finished." Grace's gaze tracked the jet, unblinking. "If he lifts," she murmured, "others live." Michael's view filled with runway sky blur motion. The horizon sharpened a line drawn between who he'd been forced to become and who he had never truly stopped being. The nose lifted. Tarmac fell away, wheels tucked up. The warthog climbed into the morning like a ghost rising from legend. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Even the wind seemed to pause, unsure whether to cheer or fear. Then the base shook with triumph and disbelief as the A-10 thundered over the rooftops, banking east like steel guided by faith. Emily whispered, voice cracking, "He did it." Grace allowed one breath to tremble free. He was always going to. Bennett shook his head like a man refusing to believe gravity had just been reinvented. "You've condemned your career, Whitmore." Grace didn't look at him. If leadership costs you nothing, it isn't leadership. The warthog punched through cloud cover. Weight pressed against Michael's chest. The sky opened in front of him like a path only he could see. Technology screamed static and his hood radar useless comms dead. Good. He didn't need them. He knew how to fly blind. The world below shrank into patchwork fields, roads, river veins, mountains swelling like stone waves. The threat zone would be ahead soon. Anti-air locks, radar traps, hostile artillery. It should have terrified him. Instead, memory flowed like blood. Training not forgotten, but buried, now rising with the certainty of muscle and instinct. He angled lower. A-10s thrived close to Earth, where danger lived and heroes bled. Sunlight flashed off his canopy. At 300 feet, altitude turbulence kicked. The aircraft bucked like a living beast. Michael's hand stayed steady. He whispered to the sky, "Easy, girl. We've done harder." Downrange soldiers pinned in canyon shadows looked upward as a distant thunder rolled through the mountains. Ethan Hale, face smeared with dust, shoulder bleeding, froze mid-reload. He squinted through smoke and glare. Holy hell. Around him, Rangers paused, disbelief rippling through worn bodies. That sound, one croaked. It can't be. Then a low rumble turned into a rising roar, the unmistakable heartbeat of a legend. Ethan's voice broke like a man witnessing salvation itself. "That's a warthog." Back on base, Grace stood alone in the wind, watching the shrinking speck in the sky. Her hand came to rest lightly over her heart, not for romance, but respect. He wasn't just flying to battle. He was flying back into himself. Beside her, Emily wiped a tear she hadn't expected. "Ma'am." "Who is he?" Grace didn't answer at first. Her eyes stayed locked on the horizon, where one solitary aircraft cut through air and doubt like truth, cutting through arrogance. At last, she spoke softly, almost to herself. Someone the world forgot, until it needed him again. The warthog tilted its wings, once, like a knight lowering visor before combat. And Michael Carter, father-widower, ghost of a warrior, pressed forward into enemy air, with nothing but grit memory and the weight of promises made to the dead and to the living. The sky did not take him back gently. It accepted him like it always had, as one of its own. The first thing to greet Michael as he descended through mountain haze was chaos made visible. Smoke threads rose from rocky ledges. Tracer rounds carved angry red slashes through the sky. And in the narrow throat of a canyon far below, pinned by enemy crossfire, 12 American soldiers fought like men refusing to let final breaths come cheap. The interference field snarled across his dashboard, scrambling every instrument that depended on modern logic. But Michael's world did not live inside glowing screens. It lived in instinct, in memory, in muscle trained not by manuals, but by moments where life and death made their own terms. He throttled low wings, skimming the ragged mountain line like steel touching stone. The A-10 growled in approval, as if recognizing the battlefield beneath and the soul guiding her through it. Down below, Ethan Hale wiped sweat from his eyes and pressed deeper against the canyon rock. His breath came ragged, chest heaving with pain and exhaustion. "Where's that air support?" a ranger shouted. Ethan didn't answer. Hope was dangerous in combat. It made men hesitate at the wrong second. But then through smoke and static, he heard something he had once dreamed about in foxholes overseas, when night seemed endless and rescue felt like myth, a low thunder that wasn't artillery. It rolled like judgment. Slow, heavy, inevitable. A sound soldiers prayed for, but never expected. "Wait," Ethan whispered. "Listen." The others fell still, even bullets seeming to hesitate midair. Then, whoomp! A silhouette tore through the mountain mist, blunt nose, short wings, twin turbofans. Ugly as sin, beautiful as salvation. Gray armor streaked with age and battle memory. A warthog. But not just any. It flew too low, too certain, too close to the earth like a predator that hunted not from above, but from within the fight itself. Who the hell a ranger breathed? Ethan's voice cracked. Someone who isn't afraid to die. Above, Michael adjusted flaps, manually ignoring the dead HUD. Smoke curled up past the wings. His breathing slowed, steady, as a priest lighting a candle. He spoke into a silent cockpit, into memory, into loss, into duty. Eyes up. Breathe. Count. He didn't need radar. He didn't need comms. He had the ground. He had the wind. And he had the promise he made beside a hospital bed long ago. A whisper into fading fingers. "I won't fail them. Never again." Enemy machine gunners on the ridge swung their barrels skyward. Michael dipped his wing. Targeting systems blinked dead. He didn't wait for them. He already knew where death hid. Brrrt. The sound tore through the mountains, unholy and sacred in the same breath. High-velocity rounds peeled rock from the cliffside and chewed bunkers to dust. Metal screamed. Dust exploded into the air. Enemy fire cut short mid-burst. Silence followed. Not peaceful silence, but stunned silence, the kind war offers only when it blinks in disbelief. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Holy!" Another gun nest opened fire from the west ridge. Michael rolled hard nose down, hugging terrain so close that pine branches whispered along the underbelly of the jet. An alarm shrieked about altitude. He ignored it. Altitude warnings were for pilots who feared crashing. He feared failing. Michael flipped switches manually, old-school tactile. This aircraft wasn't fighting the war of this decade. It was fighting war itself. He curved into a strafing arc, and once again, brrrt. A nest evaporated. Men who tried to kill would not do so again. Rangers below screamed approval, adrenaline replacing despair. Ethan watched the sky in awe. That's not a pilot. That's a ghost. Michael soared up, then banked again. The canyon walls rushed past, too fast, too close. To any other pilot, death lived here. But to the A-10 and her pilot, this was where they breathed. A missile trail streaked upward from the ground enemy shoulder launcher. Smoke corkscrewed, hungry for American steel. Michael saw it instantly. He didn't panic. He didn't climb. He dived. The missile overshot, confused by sudden disappearance. Michael skimmed the canyon floor engine, howling gravel spitting off the wings. "You don't chase ghosts," he murmured, voice steady. "Ghosts chase you." He pulled up just before rock kissed metal. The missile veered, lost lock, slammed into a cliff face. Behind the explosion, an echo whispered across his mind. A laugh, warm, familiar. His wife's. "You always danced too close to the fire, Mike." He swallowed hard. "Not today, sweetheart," he whispered. "I promised her." One last position remained, an entrenched bunker, deeper, smarter, waiting to fire once he committed. Michael saw it. He didn't go for it. He let them think he didn't know. He flew past, inviting arrogance. The bunker opened fire, tracer rounds streaking. He was already banking, already anticipating, already returning. And when he came back, he came low, so low the canyon floor blurred inches beneath him. He fired not where they were, where they would be. Brrrt. Stone shattered. The bunker vanished in dust and fire. Silence again. But this time, it was the silence of men who had just been handed life they thought lost. Ethan's knees nearly buckled. A ranger beside him wiped dirt and disbelief off his face. "Who saves people like that?" he whispered. Ethan knew. He didn't know the name, but he knew the type. Someone who lives for more than himself. Above them, the warthog didn't climb triumphantly. It didn't roar victory. It leveled. Calm, steady, almost humble. Michael scanned the ground one last time. Smoke thinned. Soldiers moved alive, breathing, going home. He finally exhaled, but there was no smile, no pride, only relief heavy as armor and soft as mercy. He whispered to no one, and to one person forever gone, "I didn't miss." Then he pulled the aircraft up, nose toward the distant sky, away from danger, away from gratitude, away from the men who would never know his name. Because he didn't fly for applause, he flew for promises. And because somewhere a little girl waited to hear about clouds shaped like marshmallows, back at Fort Heron, silence rolled through the command center like a wave after an explosion. Screens still flickered with static. Radios hissed with broken interference. Yet something heavier than failing technology hung in the air. A base, used to routine, had just witnessed a miracle. No one quite breathed. No one quite spoke. Colonel Grace Whitmore stood motionless, eyes fixed on the horizon, where the A-10 had disappeared minutes earlier. Even the low hum of generators felt reverent, as if the world itself refused to disturb the sacred weight of what had happened. Beside her, Colonel Bennett's voice finally cracked through the air, thin, brittle, furious. That was reckless, illegal, career-ending, and you let it happen. Grace didn't look at him. "I didn't give the order. You didn't stop him." "No," she said softly. "I didn't." Bennett paced in tight, angry circles. "When he lands, he's detained. I'll have military police waiting. There will be hearings, courts-martial, headlines." Grace finally turned her head slowly. "And what headline do you plan to give the families of the men he just saved?" Bennett opened his mouth, but the words dissolved before they formed. The room around them buzzed with stunned whispers. A young intelligence officer stared at a radar screen that no longer showed anything meaningful, but still felt like it should. Another man whispered to no one in particular. "He flew that thing like he had the enemy's playbook," a woman replied. Or like he wrote it. Emily Hayes stood at the edge of the room helmet under her arm. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from realizing she had just witnessed a chapter of aviation legend rise from dust and memory. She whispered, almost afraid to give voice to the truth stirring in her chest. "He didn't fly. He hunted." A murmur rippled through the room, reverent, fearful, disbelieving. Then one officer, older lines of service carved across his face, leaned in toward his console. He squinted at garbled fragments of radio noise caught briefly between the interference. "Call sign." He frowned. Adjusted gain. Static cleared just for an instant. And there it was. One word. One symbol. One ghost from America's quiet wars. Raven. The officer's hand trembled. It had sounded like he was tagged as Raven. Raven 1-3. The name drifted through the room like smoke. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered a prayer. Emily's heart stumbled. "That's not possible." Bennett barked urban legends. Campfire nonsense. But even he looked pale. Grace's brow tightened. Not panic, not shock, but recognition. Somewhere in her career in briefings, They never fully printed in rooms where power spoke in whispers instead of orders. She had heard that name. Raven 13, a call sign spoken only in fragments. A pilot who disappeared after a mission gone wrong overseas. No record, no ceremony, no body, no grave. A myth. A classified ghost. Grace asked quietly. Origin, the intel officer swallowed. Special Operations Air Support. Years ago. One mission he stopped realization dawning like a storm's first flash of lightning. The one where he didn't finish. He didn't need to. Everyone knew the story. A pilot who went dark, refused exfil, stayed to protect a ground unit when command pulled air support too soon. They lived. His wife didn't. And the man vanished. Career erased, identity, wiped sacrifice, unacknowledged, to protect an operation that never officially existed. A legend whispered between special forces units, like a prayer no one admitted believing in. The officer repeated, voice low, reverent, disbelieving Raven 13. Emily's breath hitched. In her bones, she knew. She had seen pilots fly bravely, skillfully, desperately. But what she saw today, that was not flight. That was a promise enforced by heaven or hell, whichever listened first. She whispered half to herself, half to fate. He came back. Bennett's face twisted. Myth! Fairy tale, don't be ridiculous. But his voice lacked conviction. Grace's gaze sharpened not in fear, but in understanding. Some men fight for rank, others for glory. But once in a generation a man fights because the world still owes someone a safe return home, and he refuses to let fate take another child's parent. A low rumble interrupted the silence. Heads turned. Outside the giant windows, the A-10 approached through thinning haze. Wings, steady engines scarred, but loyal nose dipped in fatigue, yet carried by purpose. Smoke streaked its armor. Shrapnel dents marred its tail. But it flew. Grace felt something tighten inside her chest, something like awe, and something like sorrow, and something like hope's fragile birth. Emily whispered. He made it back, Grace murmured almost involuntarily. Of course he did. Bennett snapped MPs ready at runway. Nobody touches that plane until Grace raised one hand. A small gesture. Yet the MPs froze before moving. Stand down, she commanded quietly. Bennett gaped. You can't, I just did, he sputtered, but her gaze cut him off. When leaders truly lead ranks, don't question they align. The A-10 touched down, wheels kissing earth, like an old warrior returning to ground, only because humans needed him to. It slowed, taxied, rolled to a stop near Hangar Bay 4. Engines spooled down, whining like a tired animal settling to rest. Dust swirled. Silence followed a silence heavier than applause could ever be. Michael Carter sat inside the cockpit, helmet still on face, shadowed. Not triumphant, not even relieved, just present. Breathing. Alive. Grace's voice was barely a whisper, meant for no one but truth itself. A man who returns after the world thinks he's gone is not someone you arrest. Emily exhaled shakily. Then what is he? Grace's answer was simple, heavy, unavoidable. A reminder of what that ordinary men walk among us until the day the extraordinary is required. Across the base, every radar tech, mechanic, junior officer, and seasoned veteran stared at the silent jet on the tarmac. No one doubted anymore. No one dared. And though nobody spoke it aloud, the truth settled like a flag raised without ceremony. The ghost had returned, not for glory, not for revenge, but because 12 strangers needed to go home to people who would never know the name of the man who saved them. And because somewhere, an 8-year-old girl with a pink hair clip waited for her father to return to her too. Night settled over Fort Heron without ceremony. No triumph parades, no music, no speeches. just a quiet base, pretending nothing extraordinary had happened, while every soul on it felt different than they had that morning. Winds carried the faint tang of jet fuel. The floodlights along the runway hummed like tired guardians. Somewhere, a radio crackled with low chatter. Elsewhere, boots marched in orderly rhythm. Routine resumed as the military always demands. But not everything returned to normal. Not tonight. Michael Carter parked his old pickup under a lamppost, whose light flickered like an exhausted heartbeat. Lily, almost asleep in the passenger seat, leaned against his arm. Her small fingers clung to the sleeve of his jacket, as though afraid he might vanish if she let go. He lifted her gently into his arms. She stirred, half dreaming. "Daddy." "Did you fly today?" Michael paused mid-step. For a moment, memory threatened to overtake him. Gunfire echoing off canyon walls, steel vibrating under his palms, ghosts whispering in the engine roar. But he kissed her forehead softly. "No, sweetheart," he murmured. "I came home." Her eyelashes fluttered. That was enough for her. It always had been. Inside their small base housing cottage, Michael laid her in bed, tucking the blanket up to her chin. Her pink clip rested on the nightstand, beside a framed photo of a smiling woman with warm eyes and hair that caught sunlight like spun honey. Michael touched the frame. His thumb lingered on the glass, tracing the curve of her cheek, familiar, sacred, unreachable. Another day, he whispered voice. Barely air. I kept the promise. Silence answered him, gentle but unyielding. He drew the curtains halfway, as he always did. Their daughter liked to see a sliver of sky through the window, just in case Mommy came to visit the clouds. Michael sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, watching Lily breathe, as if each rise of her chest returned a piece of his soul to him. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, and his lips curved in a fragile smile. "You're safe," he whispered. "You're safe, and I'm here." If heaven listened, it made no sound. He stayed there until the weight in his chest eased, not gone, never gone, but quieter. Like a storm, moving a little farther offshore. Outside, beyond the lamplight, a figure stood beneath an oak tree, arms crossed, coat collar pulled up against the cold. Colonel Grace Whitmore didn't knock, didn't announce herself. She simply watched, silently witnessing something she had not expected to see in her lifetime, a warrior rediscovering peace, not through medals or orders, but through bedtime stories and soft whispers in the dark. The sight disarmed her more than any battlefield ever had. She had prepared herself for confrontation, for righteous fury, for protocols, for the chaos a lone act of defiance could ignite. She had not prepared for tenderness. A man who flew through hell hours ago now tucked a child's blanket, like it was the most sacred duty he had ever carried. Her hands remained in her pockets, but her jaw unclenched. Something inside her, something long, frozen under rank and responsibility, shifted. This was not the arrogance of a renegade, or the recklessness of a rogue pilot. This was devotion, pure and unpretending. Duty to the smallest world a man can protect, and the largest one a father can lose. Grace exhaled breath, fogging in the evening chill. She did not envy power tonight. She envied something entirely different, the clarity of a man who knew exactly who he served. Her gaze lingered on the window, on the faint silhouette of father and daughter. Then she turned away, walking slowly down the quiet street, boots crunching faintly on gravel. She did not report him, did not summon MPs, did not write the memo she'd threatened Bennett with earlier. She simply walked, because tonight the universe had revealed truth louder than any tribunal ever could. Some men earned their second chances not through law, but through love. Inside, Michael closed Lily's door with the care of a man setting down fragile glass. He stood in the hallway, shoulders heavy throat, tight. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that used to crush him after his wife passed, before Lily learned how to bring light back to two broken souls. He moved into the living room. A bookshelf held worn paperbacks, aviation manuals disguised between children's books. Two mugs sat on the counter from earlier that morning, one for coffee, one for hot chocolate. Beside them a pink plastic spoon, tiny and bright among stainless steel. Normal life. Ordinary life. The life he chose over the sky because love demanded it. He sank into the couch, elbows, on knees, hands clasped. The adrenaline had drained. Exhaustion seeped in. But beneath fatigue lay a dangerous truth. He had tasted the sky again, and it tasted like who he truly was. A knock might have startled him, but no knock came. Grace had not approached the door, did not intrude on a sanctuary she recognized without needing invitation. So instead, Michael sat in silence, eyes closing, slowly breathing deep. The hum of the bass at night seeped through thin walls, distant engines, far-off boots, the murmuring heartbeat of a world still asking him for one more miracle. For once, he did not answer. He only whispered to the quiet that had become companion and judge I came back. His voice cracked, not with fear, not with pride, but with the raw relief of a man who nearly didn't. Outside, the wind rustled leaves. A raven silhouette passed briefly across the streetlight, glow gone as soon as seen. Ghosts did not haunt him tonight. They stood guard. In the command office across base, Grace sat alone at her desk, pen hovering above a blank discipline form. Regulations demanded consequences. Duty demanded review. But her hand did not move. Instead, she whispered 4 words into the stillness, carried not as confession, but as recognition some men are called. And the pen remained uncapped, untouched, as the night held its breath around her. The sun rose pale and tired over Fort Heron, as if even daylight felt the weight of what had happened. Morning roll calls sounded sharper than usual. Boots struck pavement with disciplined force, but beneath the rhythm lurked a tremor, an undercurrent of awe, uncertainty, and rumor stirring through ranks like wind before a storm. Michael Carter walked across the base with his usual calm toolbox in hand. Uniform, simple face, unreadable. If anyone expected him to arrive in a pilot's suit, saluted by cheering troops, they were mistaken. He arrived not as a legend, but as a janitor who had flown into death, saved lives, and returned home to make his daughter breakfast. Yet eyes followed him everywhere now. Young airmen paused mid-step. Mechanics froze mid-wrench. Officers straightened unconsciously, unsure why they felt compelled to. Whispers trailed after him like contrails in the sky. That's him. Ghost pilot. He flew that old hog like it was new. I heard he's special ops. Black Wing program. I heard he died once. To all of it, Michael offered nothing. No nod. No denial. No pride. He simply moved through the base the way the river moves around stones. Quiet, steady, unstoppable. In a way most people never notice until the flood comes. But the flood was already gathering. In the command conference room, tension stacked like sandbags. Colonel Bennett slammed a folder on the table full of printed regulations and highlighted violations. "This is it," he snarled. "This ends today." Grace Whitmore stood at the head of the table, hands behind her back. Expression composed but fierce beneath the surface. Across from them sat Captain Morse, intelligence officers, legal counsel, and 2 MPs. A silent jury waiting to see whether heroism or hierarchy would prevail. "We cannot." Bennett continued, stabbing a finger into the papers. "Allow a civilian, an unverified, unauthorized individual, to commandeer military equipment and conduct a combat operation. If we don't act, we send a message. Discipline is optional if you're talented enough. Grace spoke quietly. He saved American lives. 12 men are breathing today because of him, and tomorrow Bennett shot back. What then? Another civilian decides he feels called to take a fighter jet. We are a military, not a faith-based flight program. Morse cleared his throat. We all saw what he did, sir. That wasn't recklessness. That was skill. We don't even teach anymore. Bennett turned on him. Skill is not a rank. Skill is not legal clearance. Skill does not override chain of command. Grace held Bennett's stare. Sometimes morality outranks procedure. He scoffed, incredulous. Spare me poetic philosophy. If he's a ghost from some classified unit, then let the Pentagon claim him. Until then, he is a contractor who stole a jet. The room flinched because everyone knew the truth behind Bennett's rage. It wasn't about rules. It was about control. And yesterday control belonged to a man no one commanded but his own conscience. The door opened. Michael entered. No salute. No swagger. Just presence. Unshaken. Focused. Calm as a man walking into a mechanics meeting, not a military tribunal. His eyes swept the room, once measuring threat angle consequence. Reflexes, not defiance. He set his toolbox down gently beside a chair. If you're here to remove me, he said. Tone? Even, let's make it efficient. I still need to pick up my daughter by 3. A ripple passed through the room, half shock, half the kind of reluctant respect that only blunt honesty earns. Bennett glared red, rising in his cheeks. You think this is a joke? Michael's voice carried no arrogance, no fear, only truth wrapped in quiet steel. No. I think 12 families don't have funerals to plan today. And I think you're angry, not because I disobeyed, but because someone did what needed to be done without waiting for your permission. Bennett surged to his feet. You are out of line. Michael held his gaze. So were they. Under fire, bleeding out. Waiting. The room inhaled as one. Grace spoke then, voice low like a thread holding the world together. Mr. Carter, Colonel Bennett argues your actions violated military law. Do you have anything to say on your defense? Michael paused. Looked at her, not challengingly, but with the understanding of one leader to another, even if only one held rank. My defense is simple, he said. 12 Americans lived. A beat of silence, then softer, almost a confession. And I came home to my daughter. Eyes flickered. Even hardened officers felt something pull in their chests. Grace swallowed. And if you had failed, if that jet crashed, if you died, Michael nodded once, accepting the hypothetical without drama, then you'd have one less aircraft to decommission, and my daughter would grow up knowing her father died, trying to bring someone else home to theirs. The room stilled. Not a romantic line, not a dramatic flourish, a simple, devastating truth. Bennett tried again, voice brittle. You are not above the law. No, Michael agreed. I am beneath necessity. Bennett blinked, confused. Michael clarified. I don't act for glory or rank. I act because someone must, when others can't. Grace closed her eyes for half a second. Not weakness, but recognition. Then someone else spoke, quiet, tentative. An intelligence officer voice trembling as though he feared the name even as he honored it. Is it true? He whispered. Are you Raven 13? Michael didn't answer. He didn't have to. The room felt it. Bennett scoffed, too loud, too sharp a man drowning under truth. This isn't mythology hour. I want him detained. Effective immediately. Grace stepped forward. No. Bennett froze. Excuse me. Her voice carried weight now. Not loud, but irrefutable. No one touches him. On what authority? Bennett snapped. On mine, Grace said. and the room understood she wasn't just citing rank, she was invoking principle. She looked at Michael. "You broke procedure," she said. He didn't deny it. "Yes, you may face consequences." He nodded, understood. Then her voice softened, something unspoken in her eyes. "But you did what every leader prays someone will do when orders fail. You chose life." The silence that followed was reverent. Bennett stormed out, rage echoing like boots in an empty hallway. But no one followed him. Because deep down, every soldier in that room knew rules keep order. Men like Michael keep the world. Michael picked up his toolbox. "If we're done, ma'am, I have engines to clean and a lunchbox to pack." He walked out as quietly as he came. Grace watched him go, not as a superior observing a subordinate, but as a soldier witnessing a different kind of command. The command of conscience. And for the first time in many years, her heart, not her uniform, saluted. Evening settled over the base like a soft blanket. Warm porch, lights hushed conversations, the distant clink of boots on pavement fading as night routines began. But inside one small house tucked on the quiet edge of Fort Heron housing life was not routine. It was gentle, deliberate, sacred. Michael Carter sat cross-legged on the floor guitar resting against his knee. His fingers brushed slow chords, steady, imperfect reel. Lily sat beside him, tongue sticking out in concentration as she pressed her tiny fingers to the strings of a smaller children's guitar. "No, sweetheart," Michael whispered, guiding her hand. "That's a G chord. Try it again. There you go." It wasn't about the music. It was about presence, about giving his daughter a world where peace felt normal, where she learned rhythm before she learned fear, where her first battlefield would be the struggle to find middle C, not the sound of missiles overhead. Outside, a car rolled quietly to a stop. Colonel Grace Whitmore stepped out, uniform gone now in a simple navy coat. Hair relaxed, posture still military but softened by something more human. She hesitated on the walkway, an unfamiliar sensation tugging inside her chest, nervousness. Not of confrontation, of stepping into someone's real life. She raised her hand to knock. Then she heard its soft guitar and a little girl's laughter. The sound stopped her. Victory ceremonies never moved her like this. Duty had never shaken her like this. Medals felt hollow compared to one small child learning chords from the quietest hero she had ever known. She lowered her hand, then knocked once. Inside, Lily perked up. "Daddy, someone's here." Michael's expression shifted, not startled, not fearful, just alert, controlled. He opened the door. Grace stood there, unsure whether she belonged. "I hope I'm not intruding." Michael glanced behind him toward Lily, who waved enthusiastically. "Hi," she called. Grace's lips curved despite herself. "Hello, Lily." Michael stepped back, silently inviting her in. Grace entered with a soldier's caution and a woman's careful reverence, scanning the small space shelves of children's books, a framed family photo, a toy piano in the corner, and a faded Air Force patch tucked discreetly inside a picture frame. Not displayed. Preserved. "This is a nice home," Grace said softly. "It's small," Michael replied. "It feels full," she corrected. Lily plucked another chord triumphantly. "Daddy?" "I did it." Michael gave her a gentle nod. "Yes, ma'am." Perfect. Grace felt something tighten inside her. How many fathers had she seen give orders across war rooms, plan battles, lead platoons, but so few who gave softness so skillfully. He turned back to her voice low. "Is this official?" Grace exhaled, surprising herself. "Not tonight." She paused, searching for words that didn't exist in protocol. "I came because men like you don't just appear out of nowhere. You don't crash into history for a single act and disappear again. And I didn't want you to think that it went unseen. Michael's gaze held hers, not guarded, not open, just steady. Saving those men wasn't supposed to be seen. Maybe not, she answered. But the world rarely sees the right things. Last night it did. He didn't respond. Silence settled between them, not awkward, but weighted by understanding deeper than rank. Grace looked at Lily, who now balanced the guitar awkwardly but proudly. She's beautiful. She's my reason, Michael said simply. There it was no speech, no heroic monologue, just truth. Grace's voice softened, almost cracking at its edges. There are people in this world who act from ego, and there are those who act because they cannot do otherwise. Michael didn't flinch. I don't fly for medals, I know, Grace replied. That's why it matters. She moved to a window, staring at the night outside the same base she'd commanded through crises, but for once, feeling like she was looking at it from someone else's vantage point. You could have died, she murmured. Yes. You left your daughter without knowing you'd return. Michael's jaw flexed. His voice came quiet. Courage isn't ignoring fear. It's choosing what matters more. Grace closed her eyes, briefly touched by something painful and admirable all at once. You know, she whispered, I have commanded men my entire career. Brave ones, brilliant ones, flawed ones. But when I saw you step forward yesterday, I didn't see a man seeking battle. What did you see? A man who refused to break a promise. Michael looked down at his hands, the same hands that held a control stick hours earlier, now holding a guitar string, gently like it might bruise. My wife, he began, voice low and raw, died waiting for me. That day, I had a choice. I chose duty. I saved lives, but I lost her. Grace's breath caught. And ever since, he continued, eyes fixed on Lily. I don't fly unless someone's family depends on it more than mine does. Grace swallowed hard. Not a hero starving for redemption. A man honoring grief without letting grief define him. She spoke softly. What do you need from me? Michael shook his head. I don't need favors. I didn't ask what you want. Her voice gentled. I asked what you need. He finally looked at her fully. Let me be a father first. And if the world calls again, his answer came without hesitation. Then I go. Grace nodded slowly. A rare, fragile respect blossomed. Not military admiration, but human understanding. You don't break orders, she murmured. You break limits. Lily ran up, then thrusting a paper toward Grace, a crayon drawing 3 figures holding hands under a rainbow. Michael, Lily, and a woman in uniform with short hair and medals. Grace blinked. Is this me? Lily grinned. Your daddy's friend. Michael looked away, emotion twitching along his jawline. Grace knelt. Thank you, Lily. I'm honored. She stood. I should go. Michael walked her to the door. For a moment they stood close, not touching, but connected by quiet truths only 2 people scarred by duty can understand. Grace spoke one last time. For what it's worth, I hope one day you fly because you want to, not because the world forces your hand. Michael's voice was almost a whisper. One day. Maybe. She left. Outside, the night greeted her like an old comrade. Behind her, a father finished a lullaby on a worn guitar, and a child drifted into dreams, safe in the arms of the man who had carried his burdens alone for too long. Grace walked away knowing 2 truths. Some heroes belong to history. Others belong to a little girl who needs breakfast at 7 a.m. And Michael Carter was both. Fort Heron woke the next morning to the sound of orders barked sharper than usual. The wind wasn't the only thing shifting. Authority was repositioning lines, tightening, and shadows lengthening across the command chain. A reckoning always followed miracles. Heroes who defied the system did not walk back into still waters. They stirred them. By ZO 900, the base courtroom normally reserved for small-scale disciplinary hearings was full. Shoulders squared, uniforms immaculate, eyes sharp. Word had spread faster than classified memos ever could. Carter is being brought before the board. In the front row sat officers, legal counsel, and observers, pretending impartiality, but radiating curiosity. In the back row, maintenance crew, junior airmen, 1 or 2 pilots trying to seem like they just happened to be nearby. Emily Hayes wasn't pretending. She sat in uniform, spine, straight jaw, set as if willing truth into armor. At the center table, 2 chairs waited, one empty, one occupied. Colonel Bennett leaned forward, fingers steepled like a judge who'd already written the sentence. His expression wasn't triumph. It was something colder, a man trying to prove to himself that order mattered more than truth. Then the door opened. Michael Carter stepped in with no escort, no cuffs, no ceremony. Just steady footsteps and a silence that carried more weight than salutes ever could. He wore the same simple work shirt and boots, not defiant, not ashamed. A man who refused to dress his conscience in borrowed cloth. The room didn't breathe for a heartbeat. To see him, you would not know yesterday happened. But to feel him, yes. It lived under his skin, under his quiet, in the way his gaze didn't search for approval or mercy. He took his seat calmly. Grace Whitmore entered. Moments later, not rushed, not flustered, but with a quiet authority that made everyone in the room straighten. She took the chair beside him. Not behind him. Not across the room. Beside him. A choice louder than any speech. Bennett's lip curled. Colonel Whitmore, your presence isn't required here. Grace slid a folder onto the table. I'm here as command witness. And as ranking officer on the mission chain. You weren't on that aircraft. No. But I am responsible for every soul on this base, including his. A ripple of respect moved across the room, subtle but undeniable. The legal officer cleared his throat. This is a preliminary inquiry into unauthorized military action aircraft commandeering and breach of chain of command. Michael said nothing. His stillness wasn't resignation, it was readiness. Bennett leaned forward. Before we begin, I would like the record to note that no pilot, no officer, and no authorized personnel gave clearance for the accused to engage in combat flight operations. Grace's voice cut in controlled and sharp. He came to me and asked for protocol. I allowed a check. A meaningless gesture Bennett snapped. Grace didn't blink. He passed it. Flawlessly. The air tightened. Emily's hands clenched at her knees. Bennett turned, predatory. Mr. Carter, do you deny you violated military law? Michael met his stare. No. A murmur swept the room. Grace opened her mouth, but Michael raised a quiet hand, not to silence her, but to stand on his own. Laws exist to stop foolish men from risking others' lives, he said. They don't exist to stop a man from saving them. Bennett scoffed. So you believe you decide when duty applies? Michael's reply was not loud, but it shook something deeper than walls. No. I believe duty decides. Silence, the kind that comes when truth echoes. Bennett pounced. Then by your admission, we should place you into custody. Emily stood abruptly too fast, voice cracking with urgency. He saved 12 American soldiers. If this room had been under fire, and he stepped in, would you chain him for choosing action over death? Bennett glared. Sit down, Lieutenant, or you'll face your own disciplinary review. Grace didn't look at Bennett. She looked at Michael. If you are punished, do you regret what you did? Michael's gaze softened, not for himself, but for the memory of dust-covered soldiers, for the echo of his wife's fading breath, for Lily's sleeping face. No. I regret every day I stood by when someone needed me." He paused. "And I regret that choice once cost me my wife. I will not let it cost anyone else their family." Grace's breath trembled a fraction. Rawness flickered through her composure just long enough for anyone paying attention to see she wasn't made of marble. She was made of flesh and choices. Then came the call none expected. A voice from the doorway. Colonel Whitmore, all heads turned, a command emblem, pentagon star, clipboard tucked under arm, the quiet authority of someone who did not speak unless decisions were already made. "I'll take over from here." Bennett shot upright like salvation had arrived. Finally. The official placed a sealed document on the table. "We received intelligence confirmation. His flight directly prevented Special Forces casualties. Confirmed combat footage verifies precision engagement." Emily shut her eyes in relief, and the official continued. "A senior classified operations liaison has identified the pilot as formerly attached to a special tactical air integration unit. File designation marker Raven." Quiet gasps, a shudder across ranks. Bennett turned pale. "What are the orders?" Grace asked softly. The official met Michael's eyes. Something respectful passed there, as one soldier recognizing another soldier's scars without asking for their story. "Washington wants one thing clear," he said. "Heroes don't always wear the uniform at the moment they're needed. That doesn't make them less ours." He snapped the file shut. Case dismissed. A breath escaped the room, not cheers, but reverence. Michael inclined his head once. Not victory, acknowledgement. Bennett bristled. "You're letting him walk?" The official didn't even look at him. "Colonel, some men don't walk. They return." Grace exhaled slowly. Emily wiped her eyes discreetly. Michael stood. "If we're done here, I need to be home by 3. A small warmth tugged at Grace's mouth, almost a smile. Bennett's voice cracked behind him. "This isn't over." Michael paused at the door, turning just enough that only Bennett caught the flicker of ancient steel in his gaze. "No, it's just beginning." He left. Grace followed one step behind, not escorting him. Choosing proximity. 2 paths aligned by duty, and something quieter, deeper, a trust earned in fire, not ceremony. Outside, wind swept across the tarmac. Radios hummed. Jet fuel lingered in the air. And somewhere overhead, the sky felt less empty. 2 days passed. The base carried on jets, roared, boots, marched orders, barked. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. Fort Heron felt steadier. Like every man and woman working its runways, walked a little taller, because they had witnessed something ancient, yet rarely seen. A man who answered duty not by command, but by conscience. Yet Michael Carter felt no glory in it. He woke before dawn as always, made Lily's pancakes blueberries shaped into a heart because she giggled every time, packed her lunch, braided her hair badly until she giggled again and fixed it herself. He kissed her forehead, and in her eyes he saw not a hero's reflection, but a father's purpose. "Daddy," she said, holding her pink clip, "are you going to fly again?" His chest tightened. Children had a way of asking questions with no escape hatch. He knelt and brushed her cheek. "Only if I have to. My favorite mission is right here." She hugged his neck, like she believed him more than she believed gravity. When he watched the school bus pull away, Lily waving until she disappeared around the bend, the quiet of the street pressed in, not heavy, but full. The kind of quiet that asked a man who he wanted to be, now that the world remembered him. And before he could answer the silence, a knock came at his door. Not loud, not urgent, measured, respectful. Michael opened it to find Colonel Grace Whitmore, standing there, not in uniform but in casual clothes, dark jeans, Simple sweater hair pinned back, yet softer than usual. She held 2 coffee cups, unsure whether offering peace or company. "I didn't bring orders," she said. "Just caffeine." Michael stepped aside, amused. "Then you chose the right language." She entered. The familiarity of the little home settled around her like a blanket. A toy piano. A drawing on the fridge labeled "Daddy and Me." A photo of a woman smiling gently at a younger Michael, eyes full of trust. Grace set a cup on the table. "How are you holding up? I've been through worse hearings," he deadpanned. She laughed, short. Surprised, genuine. "I believe that." He leaned back against the counter, arms crossed loosely. "You didn't have to come." "I know," her voice softened. "But you carried a burden alone for a long time. No good commander leaves a soldier standing alone after battle. Even the unofficial ones, he asked. Especially them." Silence stretched, but it wasn't awkward. It was full 2 warriors breathing in the brief permission life granted them to be human instead of symbols. Washington called Grace, said, "They want to debrief you. Quietly. No press. No medals." "Good." Michael sipped his coffee. "Medals don't play guitar with my daughter." She smiled faintly. "They may ask you to fly again." "I know. And if they do..." He stared out the window at the empty street, the same peaceful road he'd fought to return to. "If the world needs me," he said, "finally I'll answer. But not for them." Grace's voice was soft, not challenging but understanding, for those who wait at home. Michael's eyes met hers. Quiet steel. Quiet warmth. That's the only reason worth risking the sky. Grace looked down, fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup. "I spent my life believing duty meant never bending, never breaking. But watching you..." She swallowed. "I realize duty without heart isn't leadership. It's just control. And heart without discipline is chaos," Michael returned gently. "We balance each other." Her breath hitched, not romantic, not afraid, something deeper. Recognition. Outside, base alarms suddenly echoed, sharp, insistent. Not an emergency. A scramble call. Pilots jogged across tarmac in the distance. Another mission unfolding somewhere across the world's quiet wounds. Grace didn't move toward the door. Michael didn't stand. Both listened. And then the world fell quiet again. A drill. Or someone else answering today's call. Grace looked at him. "You didn't flinch." "You did." He nodded toward her hand, slightly tightened around the cup. "You're used to being the one the sky calls." She released the breath she didn't realize she was holding. "I always thought strength meant never leaning on anyone." "Strength," Michael said, "is knowing when you don't have to stand alone." Her eyes lifted. Something like relief flickered. "You've carried your battalion," he said softly. "Your uniform, your wars. Let someone else carry weight once in a while." "And who carries you?" she asked. He thought of Lily, of his wife's memory, of the sky that had once taken everything and yesterday returned a piece of his soul he thought buried forever. "I don't need carrying," he answered. "I just need someone waiting." Grace's breath softened, almost a sigh. "Michael, if you ever fly again..." He finished for her. "I won't fly alone." "No," she said quietly. "I meant, if you ever fly again, I would like to be the one waiting for you to come home." Time slowed. Michael stood very still. Not shocked. Not triumphant. Just present in a moment he hadn't dared to imagine since the day he learned grief could swallow a man whole. He stepped closer, not too close, just enough that truth could breathe between them. "Then I'll make sure I come back. Gentle. Steady. No grand vows. No cinematic music. Just a promise made by a man who understood loss too deeply to speak lightly." Grace nodded, eyes bright, but steady. "I don't offer trust easily." "I don't return it lightly," he replied. Outside, distant engines roared again, jets cutting across dawn. The world would always demand fighters. But not every battle was fought in the sky. Some were fought in kitchens over coffee. Some in quiet rooms, where a soldier laid his armor down long enough to be human again. And some in the heart, where duty and love wrestled not as enemies, but as partners, learning how to share the same space. Grace set down her cup and moved toward the door. She paused. "Michael." "Grace." "I'm glad you came home." He nodded once. "I promised I would." She left. Michael watched the door close, then turned toward Lily's crayons scattered across the table. He picked up the pink one, the color she always used for hope. He exhaled deeply. Not the breath of a ghost returned from battle, the breath of a man returning to life. Outside, the sky was clear, not quiet, not safe, but waiting just like she would be. And for the first time in a long time, Michael Carter didn't fear the horizon. He looked at it like a man no longer running from the sky, but choosing when to rise into it. For love, for duty, for home. And this time, when the raven in his soul spread its wings, it did so not to haunt, but to come back. Thank you truly for sharing this journey with us. Stories like this remind us of the quiet strength all around us, the fathers, mothers, veterans, and everyday heroes who serve not for applause, but for love. I would be honored to know where you're watching from. Are you joining us from a small town, a big city, or maybe from overseas? Drop a comment and tell us your hometown. We read every message, and it warms our hearts to see our community gather from all across the world. If this story touched you, inspired you, or simply reminded you that goodness still exists, I gently invite you to subscribe to our channel for more uplifting moments and quiet hero stories like this one. Your support helps us continue sharing light in a world that needs it. Thank you for spending your time with us today. May peace, kindness, and courage be with you and your family. Until next time, stay safe, stay hopeful, and take good care.